Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so let's get started. Shall we call the roll, please?
Maria Ryan.
Here.
Gary Zico. Here. John Marlin. Aaron Petrie. Here. Kirsten Replogle.
Here.
Todd Rusk.
Here.
Stephen Wald.
Here.
Bart Hagston.
Here.
All right, not just a quorum, but everybody here, except I guess Jeff didn't join us tonight, did he?
I've never heard from him.
Well, he may join us yet. All right, are there any changes to the agenda? All right, well, let's turn to approval of the minutes from our September meeting. Is there, well, let's start with a motion to get it on the floor, and then we can discuss if we've got any corrections or changes. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Sure. Second.
Is there any discussion or changes? All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those are approved. Okay, now we'll move to public input, and just as a reminder to members of the public who looks like we have at least one person here to address us, that you'll need to give your name and your address for the record. We can give you 5 minutes to speak, and if you have questions, you can include those questions in your 5 minutes, and then after that, the commission will have the option to answer questions, or maybe ask you if they have any questions. So if you could start with your name and address, please.
I'm Carol McCusick, and that's 403 West University, and my email address is rancorus, that's RANKCHORUS @gmail. And what I'd like to talk about,
Microphone on?
how would I know? Push?
Oh, yes, it is. I think you just need to, speak a little bit closer into it so we can hear.
Since July 18th, the city has a ordinance that's new for haulers, amending Chapter 10 of the City Code about haulers. And the haulers have been required to offer mixed recycling to their customers. And there's, my observation is that there's a full unqualified thrust towards rewarding completely mixed recycling. So that is, I guess I can say it took me by surprise. That was the understanding of how that law should be fleshed out. And what I recommended in the build-up for that, though, when that was being constructed, I think I still hold to that proposal, which is that you would have some kind of a way to get information about this industry. And it's to be responsible for where the city has the contracts, and create the climate where people talk about it and know about it over time, and it's not secretive or intimidating to the people who work in the industry, or to the to talk about their work, or because okay, I have the kind of things that this is on a theoretical basis that I would be concerned about, is like the use of energy and chemicals and water and unreusable residues and byproducts that might be involved in the processing of the admixture, or else in the individual processes that result. I think on the proximate end, we're probably more concerned with what happens, like what happens in transit and what happens in the first phase of processing, because it's local. And if it's not under any inspection regime really, then that might be okay as long as there's a climate where we can be knowledgeable about it and be responsible for it. So in this spirit, I've directed towards Bart some questions and got very helpful answers, I felt. I don't know if he wants me to read the answers as well as my questions, and frankly, I think my time is up. I would like to ask, though, do you have if you go by the city rule, they have in their new, or their May 16th rule, that you can ask for if a majority of the people would be willing to ask for a vote, like to give more time.
Is there a motion to extend the time?
Can I just ask Carol a question?
Sure.
Is your intent to try to get public information about what happens downstream after it's been collected here? And is that what this is about?
Well, I think, we have a big contract with a, so I think, my impression is a good bit of processing happens locally by the same contractor that picks it up, because the hauler is the processor with the city contracts, and I had that impression, and I think Bart confirmed it in his answers to me. Is that correct?
The residential collection, so that we have two separate contractors, one for the single-family residence and one for the multifamily residence in Urbana, and we have separate contractors for those. One is ABC Sanitary and one is Community Resource. They both are the hauler and the processor for the materials that they collect under that contract. Those are the only materials that are collected under city contracts. So the commercial recyclables are not going to be under a citywide contract. Those arrangements are between each individual generator, each business, and the hauler that they select to use.
Are there other questions for Ms. McCusick? Okay, thank you.
Would anybody be willing to extend my time?
Is there a motion to extend the time? No, there's no motion. Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll turn to the staff report. Art?
You have before you the monthly staff report. Just a few quick updates. The residential energy audit and shell improvement program that we are doing with our federal energy efficiency dollars is progressing nicely. When the incentives from Ameren increased as of June 1, we've seen a lot more shell improvement projects since that time. We actually had 17 in August alone. We've got 67 total home shell improvement projects now complete through the end of August anyway. We've completed 568 home energy performance audits. So we've gotten a lot of participation, and those funds will be running out by the end of the year or early 2012. I would really like to see some type of this program continue beyond the extension of these grant dollars. I'm interested in hearing anything that commission members might have to suggest for us to be able to do that. Of course, money is always the issue, but I think if you see any sources of grants or anything like that, that we can continue our involvement in getting the residents of Urbana to get energy audits conducted and help them do some shell improvement projects. I would certainly entertain any suggestions that you have on that. Moving down the staff report, the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission was invited by the Housing and Urban Development to submit a full application for the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program. So this is pretty exciting. It'll be a 3-year project to develop a regional framework for sustainability planning. The amount of the federal grant would be approximately $464,000. A 20% local match is required for that federal grant. However, RPC has put together a package with a 42% match to better position their grant application. They looked at applications. Last year was the first year for this grant program. All of the funded projects last year had at least a 50% match. So this year there are some dedicated funds for smaller communities, which we would fit into that realm. So hopefully that helps better position us to receive some of this funding. And the grant funds out there to do planning processes, especially 3-year planning processes, are pretty rare. So I think this would be a unique opportunity for us to participate as a partner in a consortium of players that are involved with this planning process, and it'll really look at how do we tie in, how do we develop a regional framework for sustainability, and utilizing the current plans, the comprehensive plans of Urbana-Champaign, the long-range transportation plan. So basically tying the pieces we have already in place together into a regional framework, and addressing some of those gaps that are there currently. So I think they'll be hearing probably this fall whether or not the full grant application will be funded, and I'm hopeful that it will be. The final thing on the staff report was just a mention of the U-Cycle program. Celebrated its 25th anniversary last month, and we've been undertaking some new promotional pieces to help promote the program. We recently distributed 2,000 door hangers using student volunteers from the university during the iHelp event. So those they went out and placed door hangers around the multifamily dwellings within walking distance of the university, so getting students to help educate other students about the city's recycling program. And we've also started running some bus ads on MTD, so if anybody hears those, I'd like to hear some feedback, and anybody out there that's watching the program tonight, please give us some feedback if you hear the ads. We want to know how they were, if they were effective, and that type of thing.
All right. Are there any questions? John?
Are applications for residential audits still being taken?
Yes, they are. So residents can call Urbana Public Works, and I can give them the phone number, or they can get on actonenergy.com and call the 866 number with Ameren's Act on Energy program and schedule one of the residential audits. The subcontractor for Ameren recently bought some of the infrared equipment to do thermal scans during their audits, so they're taking a little more time with each audit now. They're not packing them in quite as tight as they were, and they're doing a little bit more explanation and hand-holding with the residents while they're there to try and better explain their findings and get them to try and take that next step to do the shell improvements. The one good thing with the increase as of June 1 in the Ameren incentives is that despite the 20% rebate that the city of Urbana has been adding on top of that with our federal energy grant, when that goes away with those increased incentives, the incentives will probably be about the same to the resident based upon the increase in the Ameren rebates.
Okay. And on the other matter you mentioned, who does the Planning Commission expect to pay up the extra 42% match? Is that going to come out of their budget, or they expect the cities to put in more than 20%?
The RPC ponied up quite a few dollars. Some IDOT funds are also being kicked into the process, a substantial amount from IDOT. And then, for example, the city of Urbana, they asked for a $3,000 cash contribution and a $3,000 in-kind contribution with staff time making that up. That was okayed by the mayor, and she submitted a letter of support to that. So that $3,000 and $3,000 is over a 3-year period, so not a large hit in any one given
It's a
year.
relatively small amount of money on the city's part.
Yes,
And we have staff time to participate, basically.
we do.
Kirsten?
Do you know, are there any other areas in the state of Illinois that are applying for this?
I believe there are 4 areas in Illinois that are also that have also been asked to submit full applications. Probably the most similar one to us would be Bloomington Normal. So they are in the running. I'm not sure. I'm sure geography plays a part in the selection of the awarded projects. So we may be in competition with them for this particular award. So that's why they were trying to increase that local match as well, to try and get us to at least rise above the other applications from Illinois.
Other questions? I had just, briefly one that it's not in the report, but I know I actually saw your email from today with regard to the what's going on at ICLEI and some of the staffing changes there. And I mean, I know your email today said that it's not supposed to have any impact on services, but if you could just give us a little overview of that situation.
Most of the commission members probably aren't aware that the ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, that we're a member of, that provides us the software tools. 2 weeks ago, they had a major change in the organization, a major restructuring in their USA branch. They laid off the bulk of their staff across the country. We do still have a staff person in their Chicago office that will be working with us. Her name is Kim Brockhoff. I've met her this past June. The other staff members that you may have met with before are no longer with ICLEI. It's kind of a tenuous period, I think, for the organization. They're still saying they're committed to providing the services and tools to their members to continue addressing climate and sustainability, and as a paying member, we will hold them to that. But it is, I think, a period where they're trying to just assess where they are and what they're going to be able to continue to provide. So their commitment, I think, is to still provide those tools and resources. What they have dropped are a lot of the network building and things like that. They were working on regional sustainability networks across the country. They helped develop one in Illinois this spring, and now those are the pieces that have largely been dropped at this point. So, but we will continue to monitor that status and see where they're at.
Thank you. Todd?
Just going a little bit further on that, given where we are in the process, how do you anticipate that might affect us, or, what we might need from them, or what we've already, done together?
I think largely we've relied upon them for their tools, for their software tools thus far. And it appears they're going to continue to be investing what they have left into the development of those tools and the continued push to get those out and into use. So I'm hoping that doesn't suffer. What may suffer might be some of the personal attention that was given to us. For example, I don't know if they would be able to attend a study session like we had them come to in December. So some of those things, I think, are probably going to be out of reach, but I think that their intention is, they're still going to be developing those tools, getting them out there, refining them, because I think that has really been the driver behind their increase in membership, people buying into those tools and seeing the value in them. And so, of course, it would be probably a misstep for them to back away from that tool development and dissemination.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. I'm just going to turn to Kirsten. I know you have an announcement this evening. So, did you want to do it later? We could just do it later. Either way.
Since you brought it up, just to let everyone know that this is my last commission meeting, and I want to thank everyone for your commitment and for the opportunity to be part of this with you guys. And I'll be keeping my eyes on you.
Well, yeah, certainly want to thank you for your time, working on the commission, and I'm going to miss you a lot because you've really got, so much, not just enthusiasm, but also the putting the shoulder to the wheel. Thinking about all those very hot mornings at the farmers market last summer, getting public input and being sure that all the pieces were there to do that. So I, going to miss your presence here, and hopefully our paths will cross again.
Definitely. I'm not going away.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll maybe turn to our continuing business, which is our work on the climate action plan. I don't know if, Bart, if you had anything that you wanted to say to start us off with, or if we should just dive right in. All right, sounds good. I know last time we talked about we wanted to take a look at some principles, sort of broad principles that we could pull together to send to the council, along with some strategies that we, would identify as kind of low-hanging fruit that the city could start on while we continue our work to try to identify the rest of the strategies that would take us to, hopefully, to our goal of 25% reduction by the year 2020. Todd, I know you were looking at loading something. Do you want to start us off with?
So I'm going to bring up a few files. The idea is to pick up where we left off when we were discussing last time. And so bring up a whole bunch of things just for reference in the discussion in case they're useful. But in the climate action planning, I guess there's been a little bit of a sense of feeling kind of stuck, and so the idea last time was, well, let's try to put together, let's think about it in two phases in terms of climate strategies. And so phase one, let's think of some things that are relatively easy to do. And so I agreed to take a crack at assembling a draft of some of phase one strategies of things that are easy to do. And so the materials that I brought together are so there's the CAPA material, that list of strategies that Bart sent out. So that was something that I considered. And basically, I just cut and pasted. I just selected from that list and did some cutting and pasting and some organizing. Looking at the list, it seemed like there's some sense in grouping things together as categories of types of projects rather than looking at this really bewildering list of a million different kinds of things. They're not all that different when we kind of put them put them together into categories and, put like next to like. So some of the other things I looked at were public input. I wanted to. That was a document that came out in a past meeting. I don't remember exactly when, but from those public input sessions, they had the people who responded had a lot to say that was relevant to this, and so I was interested to see what were some themes that kept popping up in that. And then another thing that I pulled from was a CDAC report. Basically, I have it in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, and I don't remember when that's from, maybe a couple of years ago. And let's see what there was. Yeah, I think that's... And then I also have the draft list of all the measures in the CAPA sheet, and just in case if it's useful for our discussion. So I'll just start by talking about this list that I put together in a spreadsheet, and I guess I'll also say that it's really rough, and I think could use definitely some more refining and maybe some more categorizing, and but I didn't want to spend too much time on it without getting some input. So just to keep moving, I made some categories. So at the top you can see renewable energy, and then there are some strategies in there, and education is another major category. There's energy conservation is another major category, and then the last one is just kind of a standalone. It's one strategy that was I wasn't able to really fit it in well, but it was increasing urban forests, and I'll kind of talk about all these a little bit to let you know why I'm doing these things this way. And so just starting at the top with renewable energy, that was something that so I noticed a lot of interest in the public input surveys, particularly with renewable energy certificates and purchasing green electricity. So a lot of interest in buying electricity from renewable sources. So I put those up. And then also there was less specific emphasis, at least by the public input, on actually implementing photovoltaics and solar hot water. I put those on there just because as a we can debate about whether it makes sense to do things that are purely symbolic. It's difficult to afford implementing these renewable energy in that it's actually significant with respect to our carbon footprint. But maybe one strategy to think about is small incremental investments in renewable energy, as the city can afford and in places where it makes sense. So just to give an example, a major portion of city energy expenses are on street lighting, outdoor lighting, and those kinds of things. And so there are, there's, I think, a growing availability. I guess I'll take that with a grain of salt, but there are street lighting technology that's integrated with PV, and we also, a lot of outdoor lighting is around places that's wide open. So maybe one idea is try to integrate little bits of PV as we can with outdoor lighting. So that's one example. And then solar hot water, I'll just put that up there. I don't have any great examples right now, but just to keep the conversation going. I'll move on to feel free to jump in and interrupt at any time. I'll move on to the next category, which is education, and that was a lot of interest again, in educational initiatives and in the public input surveys. And when we look at the draft measures and we see some of the percent reductions that are associated with education, some of those numbers, they're surprisingly large. And I have my doubts about the magnitude of those numbers, but that's another discussion. But anyways, I guess the point is that there are. I think the education is indispensable because we have, well, for one thing, there's a lot of interest and there's, people are asking for it. And because there's a lot of programs that are already out there, things that already exist. And so, public education, like with this conservation block grant, that can really be a strong lever for stuff that already exists and to make it more effective. So going along with that, there's 4 specific draft measures that came out of that CAPA list, and so I put those up there. So, education targeted residents and businesses about transportation and green business programs. So there's that. The next category is energy conservation. And so with this, I'll go back to that report that I referenced from CDAC, that slide presentation. And so anyways, it's very heavy on recommending energy efficiency improvements in residential, commercial sector, industrial sector, and transportation. And so again, I'll say that the exact measures that I listed on here are not necessarily the ones that CDAC recommended. I just pulled them from that CAPA list, and you can see there's lots and lots of measures here. And so this is especially a case where let's reduce this list a lot and break it down into some chunks and more categories, or package it in a different way. So I'm not going to list all these things. You can read them for yourself, and I can share this with everyone. But basically, it comes down to lots of things related to lighting in inside spaces, and heating, air conditioning, hot water. Also some things on appliances. And so if you go through this list one by one, I think you'll kind of see where there's already programs that exist. So this is where I'll go back to the education, where maybe if some of the education initiatives are ramped up, some of these initiatives that are more directly tied to energy conservation, they may have a bit more effectiveness. One that I'll mention specifically is loans and financing, and this was something that came out of this came specifically out of the public interest surveys. A lot of people have interest in doing stuff, and it's all expensive. And I know we've had the conversations about bonds and all kinds of things like that, and lots of hand-wringing and frustration, and things not happening in state government that we hoped. But I guess I'm just gonna bring it out again in case maybe there's a chance that just on a local level, maybe there's another way to think about that whole thing. So. No suggestions, no ideas, but just to kind of keep that thread alive. As I scroll down a little bit, so another subcategory, building codes and construction. So, I know that Urbana has done some updating of building codes. I'm not an expert on. I don't know all the things that they're doing. I know the city has been doing some things. So I'll just put it up there that let's keep it on the radar. Maybe it's worth looking at You know, what's on the books right now? Is there room for improvement? What does that take? So I guess I wouldn't say that adopting a new energy code would be on a short list of things that are easy to do, but maybe just investigating where it's at would be a short-term item. And then another subcategory is transportation. So if you go through this list, you can see that there are already included lots of things that are going on. But I guess I'd like to keep open the possibility that we can enhance certain things that are already happening. And then the last one, increase urban forest. We've got lots of trees here. I'm sure there's room for more. So, anyways, that's the extent of what I looked at. And anyways, I'd be really interested to hear any kind of feedback or questions that anyone may have.
Are any of these particularly indicated as low-hanging fruit? I mean, do some stick out?
Well, let's just go. So let's just go to the top, renewable energy. So renewable energy certificates and green electricity, maybe that's an example of low-hanging fruit, but I guess if there's an electricity contract already in place, maybe that's not. But anyway, so it's something that's easy to do if you've got the money there. You know, it's a financial transaction. I would say that education. I would call that relatively easy to do in the grand scheme of things, because there's lots of programs already going on, and so it's a matter of staff time and people's ability to get information out. So that would be one, and then in energy conservation. Well, an easier list. I'll just go back to that CDAC report, and I'll flip to the very last page. I think this is a great. Okay, and this is impossibly small. I thought this was a really good example of, say, low-hanging fruit on a single-family, residential level. So I'll scroll down to the bottom. So they call it "Take the $1,000 Energy Challenge." So I'm not fitting everything inside the screen. But anyways, if we want to talk about it in terms of, say, recommending things to individual, residents. So here's a list of easy things that lots of people in their homes can do. And anytime we say relatively easy to do or low hanging fruit, that has to be, we have to be careful with that, because there's when we're trying to talk about a city doing something, nothing is easy. Sure. Let's see. What are you looking for?
Actually, I'm not surprised to not see it. It's oh, there it is. Turning the electric water heater down.
Can you scroll to include the column about carbon?
Let me
Maybe just
let me back out a little bit.
There you go.
Is that good?
And what is what's the
Total.
yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. So this would be, so this is this is a household level, annual. So let's say somebody did all that stuff. So there's 10 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions.
3/4 of it's the driving.
Okay.
That's good though.
So Urbana Community, okay, so we have the number 10, and then we have Urbana Community, so that's all of Urbana, and this is in the CDAC report. Again, it's like page 1 of this same document. About 600,000 tons. So any ideas on how many households in Urbana?
About 19,000.
Okay, let's say 20,000. So 20,000 times 10, 200,000 tons. So that's a big chunk. I mean, that's such a large number, it kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit. But anyways, it's I think the punchline is that, so a list like this, I mean, it looks kind of insignificant. But if we, assume that lots of people pitch in and whatever, a lot of little things adding up to something that's worthwhile.
Well, I mean, our goal was 240,000 tons. Is that right?
I don't know what the proportion is in the city of Urbana. I know there is a pretty large group of people that are environmentally conscious and live in Urbana because it's such a walkable, bikeable community. I don't drive 20 miles a week, so for a chunk of the population, that one wouldn't even apply. So we'd have to make accommodations elsewhere.
Yep.
Yeah,
and there
probably
are the folks that could trim 100 miles
That's
off of
true.
their weeks fairly easily too.
That's true.
Yeah, and I think, even though, like, if it were every single household could, reduce by that much, yeah, I think there is going to be that unevenness that some people are already, because I've already got, like, most of the stuff on this list is, I'm already doing it, and I've been doing it for some years, so my household probably wouldn't, contribute to the reduction very much, but then again, there might be other households
You're not
that
the
have
median population either.
I'm sorry?
You're not the median population, I think. One thing, so conversation can continue as people are interested, but I guess one thing that I'd be interested in, so I'm going to, keep looking at this, and I mean, this input helps, so I'm going to keep looking at this and work on that list and, see if there's, try to improve it, but I'd appreciate if some other folks have an opportunity to look at the list and put some thought into it and, work together to improve it.
Concerning the green energy, I guess maybe it was 2 meetings ago, I expressed an interest in finding out more about local options for green energy.
Mm-hmm.
And some things, I got a list of different distributors: Blue Star, Champion, Constellation, Direct Energy Services, First Energy, Integris, Liberty Power Holdings, Nordic Energy Services, which apparently are serving this area. But when you get into websites and try to see what actually the green energy is, it gets a little tough to pin down, because then they say, well, this may be 50% green energy. And then when you get into the plan, it tends to disappear a little bit. Without talking to somebody, it's a little bit nebulous as to the ones I looked at anyway are saying. But for one of them, for example, Fighting Illini, I looked at. Fighting Illini mentions Champion. It uses Champion for their green energy, apparently. And there's a 50 and 100% plan. And then I can't find out if it's 50 or 100% they're talking anymore. But if you sign up with them for 12 months, you'll pay $6.20 a kilowatt hour. Ameren is $5.80. So that's a premium. For 24 months, you actually pay more, $6.40, because I guess you're locking in and prices may go up. So that's something like a 7% premium. Again, I'm not sure if that's 50% green energy or 100%,
Right,
but it gives you
right.
sort of a ballpark of what's going on. And I'd really like to clarify this. I mean, it'd be great if you could come up with a list for people in Urbana. These are all the things you can do, and I'll try that. But it's tough. It's tough to really figure out what's happening here with all these things. But that may be low-hanging fruit. I mean, I'd pay 7% extra to get, if I was really convinced that it's going to mean that they're going to be throttling down some coal plants and turning on some wind turbines that perhaps are not being used. I don't even know how that works. Because, all the electrons are mixed in the system. What does it really mean if I go to one of these green energy? Is it really having an impact? The same thing comes up with the renewable energy certificates. So,
Yeah.
but that's an area that's, a big one, because everybody is using all this electricity, and it's coal for the most part here. And that could potentially have some impact at, low-hanging 7% is not, and you could easily, with this, offset that 7% in use. So you could be playing the same or less and being theoretically 100% green in your electricity usage. That's kind of interesting.
We have a model for businesses and municipal organizations getting together and then going out for power contracts and things like that. I wonder if there's a model for, you're going to say something.
Yeah, and I mentioned this just in passing at last month's meeting, the municipal electric aggregation, and there's been a lot of movement on that in the past month, and I'll share a little bit of that with you. So basically in Illinois, there was a law adopted in 2007 which allows municipalities to pass, if they have to get a referendum passed, and if that passes, then they are able to bundle all of the residential and small business electric accounts in town up to a certain kilowatt hour on the small businesses. So you're able to bundle all of those together and go out to bid for alternate retail suppliers of electricity. There are several communities in the northern end of the state and the ComEd territory that have done this in the past year. There's currently kind of a rush of communities in Ameren's region right now that are trying to take advantage of this. There's probably about 10 of them in the Peoria area, and there are a few in the Metro East area. And we've also been talking about that here at the city level, and we've actually been talking to a few consultants who come in and assist communities in basically getting the referendum passed, educating residents about what it means, and then developing, working with suppliers and getting the contracts in place. So it's basically an opt-out referendum. So if the referendum were to pass, every resident and small business in town, their electric account would become part of this new third-party supplier. And you'd still only get one bill from Ameren because we're using their distribution lines, but the generation portion would be broken out separately on the bill. And the communities that have done this have seen 10 to 15, maybe even 20% savings on that generation portion of their bill. I was speaking with a representative from a Chicago suburb today, and they went out to bid 2 weeks ago, received 5 proposals from alternate suppliers. And they bid it out so that they got, each bidder had to provide 2 rates. One was a best rate, and then another was a 100% renewable energy rate. When they got the bids back, there was only 0.2 of a cent difference per kilowatt hour for the renewable rate versus the best rate, which is traditional sources of energy. So right now, they are going through the process of negotiating with those suppliers and trying to pick one. In that village's instance, the default rate will basically be that best rate that was provided by the suppliers, and residents can then opt to sign up for that 100% renewable rate. A municipality could very easily say, we're not concerned about the best rate, the prices are close, we want the 100% renewable rate for the whole community, and then you could potentially really make a big dent in your greenhouse gas emissions reductions. But those rely on the renewable energy credits, like Gary mentioned, which we had talked about in August, and I think there's still a general lack of understanding as to what the certificates mean, and you can read about good RECs and bad RECs and forward pricing RECs that encourage the development of new wind farms and new sources of renewable energy, and those bad RECs that may be just leftovers from an existing facility that haven't been sold off for the year. So I think there's still some analysis of that we need to be working on. But we are actively talking with some consulting firms that are interested in helping the city of Urbana go through this process. We're still trying to evaluate whether or not, what would the savings be to residents of Urbana if we were to go through this. The savings right now are pretty good, but some indications show that the state's default rate for electric rates will likely come down in 2013. So if we go through this process of aggregation, we may see big savings in 2012 after it's implemented, but we're not sure what those savings might be in 2013 once the state renegotiates their power supply contracts in the Ameren territory. So we still have some questions on that. Those are questions I'm going to be posing tomorrow to one of the consultants that we've been talking with, and hopefully they can help answer some of those outstanding questions that they have. I can't say at this point in time if this is something that we're going to go forward with. If we do, there's a very tight timeline to get a referendum on the March ballot. You have to have it filed sometime in December. There would be a lot to happen between now and December, and then especially between December and March, to educate the public as to what is this aggregation program, how does it affect me, what will the rates be, how do I opt out if I want to opt out, and what are the renewable energy options under it. So I know people in Urbana are getting pieces of mail from different companies, third-party suppliers that are wanting to provide to be their electric generator, and some of those companies may be the same ones that would apply, that would submit a bid for an aggregate at the municipal level. Of course, the rate you're going to receive under that aggregation is going to be a lot less than what residents are going to pay individually to those companies. So there's still a lot of questions there. If we do decide to move forward with this, a lot of things are going to happen very quickly. I'm at the table along with some other city staff members in this discussion. Of course, my interest is energy efficiency, renewable energy, bringing that to the forefront. So I certainly want to keep those things alive in the conversation, and because I think, if we move forward with this electric aggregation process, if we get all these questions answered, it could help with our emissions reduction, and so I think it has some hope, but I'm kind of holding off complete buy-in until we get those questions answered.
Bart, at what stage in the process would you kind of could you go out to bid and have actual potential options? Does it all happen on the back end after you've authorized the program, et cetera?
Yeah, basically, if we decide to get it on the March ballot, if the residents of Urbana were to pass this referendum, then immediately you begin working with your consultant to develop. You have to adopt a plan of governance, which has to be approved by the ICC. So you have to get that approved. Once they approve it, then your consultant is keeping an eye on the electric supply, the pricing rates and things, and your consultant would then have the pulse of the industry and the different providers as to what rates they're throwing out there right now, and you would be looking at somewhere in like a 1 to 3 year contract term, trying to get the maximum savings based upon the projected pricing swings. So that would happen, and then you would, the community that I was talking about in the Chicago area, their city council or village board approved got their plan of governance approved, sent out the RFP within a week or two. They got 5 proposals back, and they're looking to move on it so they can implement by January 1. So, there are a lot of steps and a lot of things that need to occur, but, you can get it to happen, kind of fast-track things if need be.
But as far as the information at hand during the referendum, it's just comparables from other cities and acknowledging there's a little bit of uncertainty about what actual contracts will be available when you go to bid.
Yes, yeah, but also the good part about the program is anyone can opt out. So you could vote to have aggregation go forward and see what the resulting contract price is. If you don't like it, then you opt out and go back with a different provider. So really, by implementing the aggregation and passing it, you're really maximizing your personal options for energy supply and for your best rate.
So this has happened already in Illinois, or it's about to happen in some places?
There are several communities that it has happened with in northern Illinois, so ComEd territory. There haven't been any that have approved it in Ameren, but there are several currently working fast and furious on it.
And have any of those opted for the 100% green energy?
They're all right now at the stage of, the ones in Ameren territory are at the stage of trying to get it on the ballot in March.
With the ComEd people?
The ComEd people, I've only had an in-depth conversation with the one I referenced before, and they had the 2-tiered pricing. The others, I'm not sure. I think most of them, from what I've read, have basically, it's been really focused on energy, saving money on your energy bill, and they've been mostly smaller communities than Urbana that have done this. So I don't think there are a whole lot of them on the list that really have emissions reduction and climate planning on their brain, and so they really haven't tied it into that larger effort. Yeah,
but we could.
Yeah.
Do these meetings you've been attending include such topics as how we avoid an Enron type situation and how the various contractors who are offering this energy are either regulated or there's oversight to make sure they're capable of doing what they claim? I remember not too many years ago, a lot of states and municipalities got in trouble because they had contracts with outfits that didn't work out. I mean, is this part of the discussion, or are we just going to be in a situation where they say, we've got a whole new system here, and all these people say they'll supply electricity?
I'm sure that will be part of the conversation. We haven't had any of these meetings yet, so we're really been doing a lot of research, calling people, talking on the phone, emailing. So, in the next, we've got a meeting tomorrow with a consultant. I have one next week with another consultant. So, I think that's a good point that you make, John, and I certainly want to ask about, the stability of these companies and what are other communities doing to look at that stability, and the consultant that we would work with, that would be, I imagine part of what they would help us look at would be, trying to weed out suppliers that may be marginal. But I think you make a good point, and I think that's something we need to be asking about.
Could you just, kind of plan to include updates about this effort in the staff reports for
Yes,
upcoming meetings?
yeah.
That'd be
It's
great.
it's been I didn't include it in this month because it's been happening very quickly. So, but I will.
I appreciate the
keep you
verbal
updated.
update.
Yes.
So,
Not to distract from Todd's discussion, I think that kind of played into the
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
although I
renewable
think-
part, and
Yeah.
you know, if renewable energy on a community-wide scale is going to happen, that type of program is probably the best bet, at least at this point in time. It may not be exactly without some demerits to it, but I think, you know, at this point in time, that's probably our greatest hope for you know, large-scale reductions based upon renewable energy. So I think that you know, that kind of tied in nicely to what Todd was talking about.
I'd like to just step a little bit to the side of some of the, you know, what we've been talking about. I was thinking through some of this morning with regard to what we're aiming to send to council. And I know we had talked about, you know, having this list of strategies, and thank you very much for that. I mean, it's great to see that, and I think, you know, probably if you could send us a copy of it, and maybe, you know, between meetings we can get some feedback to you and work on that. I know we'd also talked about principles, and I was thinking this morning about, you know, what kind of a structure of a document that we can, you know, send to the City Council as our Phase 1 document. I know that, you know, we've had a couple of items that we've already agreed upon, but that we have not yet sent to the City Council for their approval, or, you know, for their adoption kind of at the city level as opposed to just our commission level. And, you know, the two in particular are our vision statement and our reduction target. And I'd really like to see both of those elements included in the Phase 1 document. Now, the vision statement is a little bit broader than just a climate action, but my thought was that it would be presented as, you know, the climate action plan is part of what the city would be doing to enact that vision. And then presenting, so maybe start with a vision statement, ask for formal adoption by the City Council, our reduction target as well, and ask for formal adoption. Although I think it would probably be fair of us to maybe make that contingent on our following through over the course of the next, whatever, you know, 7 or 8 months with a more comprehensive list of strategies. Then we're going to be able to send them, you know, immediately. And then I'm thinking the vision statement, I think, would go to some, I think it will help frame some of the principles, because we're also talking about maybe having a set of principles. But because the vision statement is pretty high level and it doesn't address simply the climate dimension of sustainability, that we would also want to sketch out some principles. And Bart, I think that was really helpful when you sent out the packet materials, you know, just talking about, well, there's a lot that's already in the goals that we sent to City Council, a year or two ago, that probably could be pulled out and maybe modified a little bit into, you know, some principles that we want to see enacted or adhered to with regard to climate policy. The other dimension of it that we haven't really discussed as a body is this. I know that there have been various issues, kind of one-off projects that have, you know, come to the attention of the public, or maybe come to the attention of one or the other of us as commission members. And we've a little bit kind of had our hands tied a little bit because we don't really have a document or a plan document against which to assess some of these things that come to our attention, but that would, you know, logically, I think, fall to us to make a recommendation on. And I would like to see, as part of what we send to the City Council, some definition of, you know, a request to the City Council to have us do formal reviews of projects that fall into certain kinds of categories. And I think in particular, the kinds of projects that would fall into categories that are related to the set of strategies. And, you know, I think based on Todd's list, that we're sending to them, because I think at that point, we are actually, giving them some kind of a framework and building for ourselves some kind of a framework for being able to make recommendations on things that come our way. But I think it would probably behoove us to get, because it's not really in our founding ordinance. It says that we're supposed to advise, but it says that in this very, kind of high-level, vague way. And I feel like, we could have a lot more traction if we had more definition from council about what types of things we would be reviewing and making recommendations on. So I guess what I want to do is just throw out as a proposal that we work on maybe between now, and I would be happy to, take a crack at making a draft of it, a phase 1 document that would include those elements.
I think that's a great idea. I'd like to put in a plug for the sustainability report from 2008 too, and consider as part of the drafting of this phase 1 document, reviewing some of the, what I like about the report is they've got the challenges and opportunities for improvement, and there's probably some opportunities that have been addressed or we know more about to know whether they're feasible or not since this report was written. So it seems like a fairly thorough review of this part of the document to sort of help flesh out what those first sets of recommendations are going to be, or actions to take, because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in here too. Right. And so, one of the things that people hate about doing plans or reports is they sit on a shelf and nobody ever looks at them again. And I think this is a really good opportunity to use all the information that went into here to create something that's really going to be functional from this commission.
Maria?
Yes.
Am I correct, since this predates me, many of the items that were identified in the 2008 report are the ones that then showed up in the city council's adopted goals from February of 2010? Is that
There was certainly a relationship between, as far as, among the, it was probably the biggest of the documents that we had been focusing on, although it wasn't simply limited to what had been in there.
Okay.
So,
okay. I wanted to make sure I was
yeah.
sensing that correctly, so thank you.
So with that, then maybe this is something that you already considered or even mentioned, maybe having a timeline that includes things like that. Like this report came out, it had these recommendations, the city adopted those things. Any other kind of significant milestones?
I may turn to staff a little bit for some help on that. I think I have another document that when we were doing our public input sessions a year ago, spring, I had some timelines written out. So I'll see what I have there and maybe, need to see what else can be pieced together.
Yeah, I think, we can certainly meet and discuss how we're going to lay all that out. And then I'll be working on trying to pull together that greenhouse gas inventory of the 2007 baseline year that we were going to include in the phase 1, trying to get that clearly laid out and succinct and make sure that we've got all the data points in there that we need. So, I think that's an important piece of that phase 1 report that we need to have is, the baseline here's where we're at, so we can lay out where we need to go.
Other ideas, other things that should be included? All right. Well, I will take a crack at that between now and our next meeting and Yeah, Todd, if you could, I think what I'll do is if you can, send the list, I'll probably just put it in as is, and then we'll, bring, because whatever I spin out is going to need a lot of editing and changing and so forth as well, so we can bring it all together. Gary?
Question, I mean, this renewable electricity thing is still really intriguing to me. If Urbana, I mean, if everything in Urbana was green energy, what would that do to our greenhouse gas emissions and movement toward our goal? I mean, do you have any feeling for that at all? Because you have it broken down by sort of sector, transportation, but you also broke it down by energy, electricity versus liquid. Didn't you have that as well at some point?
I think that data is there. I haven't went back and looked at it to see, what if we took all electricity, in Urbana and switched it over to green electricity,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. So, I think we can look at that. I'm still not sure, when you buy a renewable energy certificate, you're basically buying the property rights to the emission savings of that kilowatt hour or that megawatt.
But still, in the limiting case, I mean, in the best of all worlds, if this really did mean that we were not burning any fossil fuels with our electricity, I'd like to know what that best scenario would be. Because if it isn't very good, then it isn't really worth looking at. If it's very attractive,
I just pulled out, so
Okay.
that CDAC report that I was
13%.
referencing. So in residential sector, electricity is 74% of the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. And then commercial is about 68%, and then industrial is 13%. So it's a big chunk, electricity.
But this overestimates a little bit because people are burning liquid fuels in their transportation. This is just in their house.
That's true. That's
So
just, so, yeah,
But still, it's a big.
it's a big chunk.
You have to aggregate how many kilowatts are used by the city from the port, right?
Yes.
I mean, I would suggest that if that happened, I mean, on the one hand, it certainly has the potential to get us a long way towards the goal. And I'm also thinking about, that was among the top 2 strategies that we saw, on the top of the list from the Kappa software. But I think that then we would have to reassess what the subsequent strategies would be, because if you have all of your electricity coming from clean renewable sources, then it doesn't matter as much whether you have an energy efficient refrigerator as far as the carbon footprint goes. So we would have to, I think, reassess. I mean, it's still good to have efficient appliances, but it's not going to make as much difference toward that particular goal. I think we would probably maybe then look at putting more towards maybe the transportation-related strategies or something like that, then that becomes more of a priority for where to put the city's resources.
But the 25% by 2020 is just a start, right?
Yes.
So if we get that through a green, or close to that, through a green energy, then if we're doing the household things like on that little cheat sheet, save $1,000 a year or whatever, that gets you further. And if you're incorporating growth and all this stuff in there, we can't stop at 25%.
Right.
So.
Just an initial goal towards the, 80% by 2050?
Right.
So, yeah. And we might actually need to revise the cheat sheet. So bicycling counts for more.
I think it's also important to remember that on these drafts we had, the renewable energy certificates and green purchases were at the top by default, because that's the only way we could get the numbers up to anywhere near the goal. And I'd be willing to bet that most people, when you look at this cheat sheet, have no idea how long their shower is. And a lot of people are probably paying more attention than they did 10 years ago to what the thermostat's set at. But we might think about possibly doing things like recommending egg timers and thermometers. And another thing I know that one of my friends learned is if you get up in the morning and you're only going to be in the house a half hour to an hour before you go to work all day, rather than turn your thermostat all the way up, have a space heater in the bathroom so you take your shower. And then you don't have to bring the house up until you get home in the evening. So there's a variety of things people might start thinking about if they got tweaked a little bit. Maybe we need a waterproof egg timer, but...
Not to mention a waterproof space heater.
Well, you don't put it in the tub or the shower, you leave it in the space. We have GSFIs for that, or GCFIs.
You know, one way to roll with that idea is maybe to adopt some people who want to do a lot of those kinds of things in their house and then open it up and say, hey, come on over. You know, like there are the solar homes tours and that kind of stuff. So efficient house tours. I don't know that we've had any in town. Maybe we have, but that might be something.
All right, anything else? Okay, well, I think we've got our homework, so. New business, we don't have any new business. Announcements, I'll just start briefly with one that we're gonna have to select a new vice chair next time. Are there any other announcements? Gary.
Yeah, well, I did the Cycling Savvy course last month, which worked out, I thought, really well. This was a 9-hour course, 3 classroom and then 6 hours on road stuff, and we had a lot of fun with that, got good reviews. And as a result of that, and having somebody in the course from the Office of Sustainability, Morgan Johnson's, they're going with an event on Sustainability Week. So November 2nd, from 6:30 to 9:30, we're doing the 3-hour in-classroom part of Cycling Savvy in the ARC Auditorium, which seats 150 people. And this is going to be a challenge to get people in there and stay for 3 hours. But it is really, if you ride a bike or are interested in riding a bike, it is the thing to do. As I was mentioning to, I think it was Kirsten before, I've been on a bike for 5 decades. I've ridden on 5 continents. I've been a commuter, a tourer, a racer, and I took this 9-hour course in St. Louis in May, and I was blown away by it, and I said, I have to become an instructor. I went back the next month for 3 days of training on the instructor, and it is really, in terms of the video, the graphics, how it's organized, it is top-notch. It comes from the Florida Bicycling Association, and it's going national. So be there, tell people. I can send you a flyer that we have if you want to post it different places, and we'll see how that goes. And then the follow-up will be November 12th. We hopefully will have the parking lot drills and a 3-hour road tour, but that can only handle like 10 people because we can only do small numbers for that. But if you get enough people interested, we can do that again in the spring as well. So we'll put that on your calendar, and it's November 2nd, Wednesday, from 6:30 until 9:30, and it's in ARC, right? The Activities Recreational Center, that's what it's called, and their auditorium, which is on the concourse level, 1 level down from the entrance. So check that out. I'm kind of excited about doing this.
All right, other announcements? Bart?
I just want to take a moment to plug the 4th and final electronics recycling collection event for the year. It's on Saturday, October 29th from 8 until noon, and that's at the News-Gazette Distribution Center on Apollo Drive in Champaign. So they will be accepting up to 10 electronic items per person for free. So please come out and participate in that in anticipation of the electronics ban, landfill ban that's going to take effect in January.
Great. Any more? Is there a motion to adjourn? there a second? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.